There's someone you still think about. Not every day. Not in the obsessive way that would make it obvious to anyone watching, but in the quiet way that catches you off guard at the worst possible moments. You'll hear a song that sounds like the way they used to talk. You'll pass a street that smells like the place you once sat with them for an hour and said things you've never said to anyone since. You'll be lying in bed on a Tuesday night, perfectly fine, and suddenly their face will surface from wherever you keep the things you don't look at on purpose. And for a few seconds, you'll feel the full weight of something you've never been able to name. Not heartbreak exactly, not regret exactly. Something in between. Something worse than both, because at least heartbreak has a story attached to it. At least regret has a clear beginning and a clear end. What you feel doesn't have any of that. What you feel is the ache of something that almost was but never quite became. And the reason it still hurts after all this time is that it never got the ending that would have allowed you to put it down. If that just described something you've been carrying quietly for months or years, I need you to stay with me, because this is one of the most common forms of grief a human being can experience, and it is also one of the least acknowledged. There is no word for it in any language you speak. There is no card for it. There is no ceremony. There is no socially acceptable way to say I'm grieving someone I never technically had. Because the moment you say it out loud, the world rushes in with corrections. You weren't together. It wasn't real. You barely knew them. You're romanticizing something that didn't happen. Move on. And so you do what people always do when grief has no social permission to exist. You carry it silently. You tuck it into the back corner of your mind, where the things that don't make sense to other people go. You tell yourself it's stupid. You tell yourself it shouldn't still matter. You tell yourself that a reasonable person would have let this go a long time ago. And none of that makes it go away. Because grief doesn't care whether the thing it's mourning was official. Grief only cares whether it was real to you. And it was real to you, whatever it was, however brief it was, however undefined and unfinished and impossible to explain to anyone who wasn't inside it. It was real to you. And that's enough for it to leave a mark that lasts longer than things that were supposed to matter more. Let me tell you why this particular kind of loss is so stubborn, because once you understand the mechanics of it, you can stop blaming yourself for not being over it yet. When a relationship ends, when a friendship dissolves, when something real and named and acknowledged comes to a close, your mind gets to do something very important. It gets to process the loss as a completed event. There was a beginning, there was a middle, there was an end. The end may have been painful, but it was an end, and your brain can work with endings. Your brain knows how to file a story that has a last chapter. It knows how to grieve a thing that finished. It knows how to take a completed experience, feel the pain of its absence, and slowly, over time, move the memory from the active part of your mind into the archive, where things that are over go to rest. But the things that never quite became anything don't have a last chapter. They have an ellipsis. They trail off in the middle of a sentence that was going somewhere important, and your brain doesn't know what to do with that. Your brain keeps the file open. It keeps returning to it, not because you're obsessive, not because you can't let go, but because your mind is designed to complete things, and this thing was never completed. It was interrupted, and interrupted is a completely different experience than finished. Finished lets you grieve and move forward. Interrupted keeps you suspended in the space between what happened and what could have happened, and that space is where the most persistent kind of longing lives. This is why you can be completely over a 3-year relationship that ended badly and still aching over a 2-month almost something that ended with a slow fade into silence. The 3-year relationship was painful, but it had structure. It had enough reality for your brain to process. The 2-month thing had no structure at all. It was all possibility and no resolution. And possibility, when it's taken away before it can become anything, leaves a specific kind of wound that closure cannot reach because there was never enough substance for closure to attach to. You can't close what was never opened. You can only sit with the permanent incompleteness of it and hope that time does what your mind cannot. Here's the part that makes this even harder, and it's the part that most people never talk about. The version of this person that you miss is not entirely the person they actually were. It's the person they were becoming in the space between you. Every human relationship is partly real and partly projection. When you're getting to know someone, when the connection is still forming, when things are charged with newness and possibility, your mind is doing something remarkable. It's taking the fragments of this person that you can actually see, the way they laughed, the specific thing they said that made you feel like they understood something about you that nobody else had ever noticed, the way they looked at you in that one moment that you keep returning to, and it's weaving those fragments into a complete picture. But the picture isn't entirely them. The picture is them plus everything you hoped they would be. The picture is them plus every unmet need you were carrying when you met them. The picture is them plus the story your imagination started writing the moment the connection began. And that's not a criticism of you. That's how every human mind works during the early stages of connection. The difference is that in relationships that actually develop, reality eventually fills in the gaps. You learn who the person actually is, not just who you imagine them to be. You see their flaws, you experience their limitations. You discover the places where the fantasy doesn't match the truth, and the connection either survives the adjustment or it doesn't. Either way, the image becomes realistic, and realistic images are easier to grieve because they're grounded in what actually happened. But in the almost connections, the image never gets corrected. The fantasy never meets reality long enough to be tempered by it. So what you're left missing is not a person. You're left missing a possibility. And possibilities are infinite by nature. They can be anything. They can be everything. And that's why losing them hurts in a way that's so hard to articulate. You're not just mourning the person who left or faded or disappeared. You're mourning every version of the future that existed in the space between you, every conversation you would have had, every joke you would have shared, every quiet morning you would have spent together, every fight you would have survived, every boring Tuesday that would have been better because they were in it. None of it happened, but all of it felt possible. And the death of possibility is a grief that has no bottom, because you can never prove it wrong. You can never say it wouldn't have worked, because you never got to try. There's another layer to this that I want to name carefully, because it's the layer that makes people feel the most ashamed, and it's the one that matters most. A lot of people who carry this kind of grief are not just grieving the person, they're grieving the version of themselves that existed in that person's presence. Because something happened to you in those conversations, in those moments, in that brief window when the connection was alive. You became someone. Not someone fake. Someone more real than usual. Something about this person's attention, this person's energy, this person's way of looking at you, unlocked a part of you that normally stays hidden. You were funnier around them. Or more honest, or more tender, or more brave, or more yourself in some way that you've been struggling to access ever since. And when the connection disappeared, that version of you disappeared with it. Not because it was dependent on them, but because it hadn't been alive long enough to survive on its own. It needed more time, it needed more sunlight, it needed more of whatever that specific connection was providing. And it didn't get it. So part of what you're missing when you miss them is actually you. The you that showed up for those brief moments and then went back into hiding when the moment passed. And that particular grief, the grief of losing access to a version of yourself that you liked, is one of the most disorienting things a person can feel, because it makes you wonder whether that version was real or whether you invented it. And the answer is that it was real. It was always real. It was always in you. It just needed the right conditions to surface, and the conditions left before the surfacing was complete. Now I want to tell you something about the way this kind of grief moves through a life. Because if you're in the middle of it, you need to know that you're not stuck. You feel stuck. You feel like this should be over by now. You feel like a reasonable person wouldn't still be circling back to the same face, the same moment, the same feeling after this much time has passed. But you are not unreasonable. You're experiencing a grief that was given no tools and no language, and no permission to run its course. And things that aren't given permission to run their course don't quietly resolve. They circle, they pulse, they go dormant for weeks and then return at full intensity when you hear a certain song or pass a certain corner or have a certain kind of day that cracks open the place where you stored them. The circling is not weakness. The circling is your mind trying to complete something that was never completed. And every time the memory surfaces, your brain is making another attempt to write the last chapter, to find the closure, to make the open loop finally close. But it can't close it because there isn't enough information to close it with. You don't know why it faded. You don't know what would have happened. You don't know if they think about you the same way. You don't know if the thing you felt was mutual or imagined or somewhere in between. And without that information, your mind keeps circling the gap, hoping that this time, it will land on something solid enough to build an ending out of. It never does. And the circling continues. So how does this eventually ease? Not how does it end, because I don't want to lie to you. Some version of this will probably live in you for a very long time, maybe always. Not as a wound, but as a texture. A soft spot in the architecture of who you are. A place that still feels tender when you touch it, even years from now, even when you've built a beautiful life that has nothing to do with this person. It eases not by resolving itself, but by being allowed to exist without being a crisis. Right now, every time the memory surfaces, you treat it as a problem, as evidence that something is wrong with you, as proof that you need to try harder to let go. And that response, that panicked resistance to the feeling, is what keeps the feeling sharp. The moment you stop treating it as a problem and start treating it as a scar, it starts to change. Not because the feeling goes away, because the relationship to the feeling changes. You stop fighting it. You stop being ashamed of it. You let it sit in you the way old grief sits in everyone, quietly, without needing to be fixed, just acknowledged and carried and occasionally felt. The almost connections are not less meaningful than the real ones. They are differently meaningful. They teach you things about yourself that nothing else can teach you, because they show you what you're capable of feeling when the right person creates the right conditions. They show you what you look like when you're not performing. They show you the depth of your own hunger for connection, which is not a weakness. It's a measurement of how much you have to offer when the right connection actually arrives and stays long enough to receive it. And I want to tell you something about the person you keep thinking about. Whoever they are, wherever they went, whatever the silence between you has become, the connection was not a mistake. It was not a waste. It was not something you should have protected yourself from by feeling less. The fact that you felt so much in so short a time is not evidence that you're too intense or too attached or too desperate. It's evidence that you are capable of a kind of openness that most people spend their entire lives being too afraid to experience. You opened. It cost you something, and the cost is what you're still feeling now. But the cost is not a punishment. The cost is just the price of having been brave enough to feel something real before you knew whether it was safe. And the people who have the courage to do that, the people who keep doing it even after it hurts, even after the almost connections pile up and the grief accumulates and the world keeps telling them to be more careful, those are the people who eventually find the thing that stays. Not because they got lucky, because they never close the door that most people close after the first time it hurts. If you are carrying one of these unnamed griefs right now, I want you to do something for me tonight. I want you to let yourself miss them without trying to make it make sense, without justifying it, without minimizing it, without telling yourself the story about how it wasn't real enough to matter. Just let the missing exist, the way weather exists, without needing your permission and without requiring your analysis. Let it move through you the way it's been trying to move through you for however long you've been holding it still. You're not crazy for still feeling this. You are not weak for still caring. You are someone who once stood very close to something that could have been extraordinary, and the almost of it has been living inside you ever since. And that almost is not your enemy. It's the proof that you are still open, that you are still capable, that the part of you that knows how to feel deeply has not been destroyed by all the times the depth led nowhere. The person you never had still matters. Not because they were yours. Because for a brief and unrepeatable moment, the space between you was the most honest place you'd ever been. And the fact that you remember it, the fact that it still reaches you, is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that something inside you is still profoundly, stubbornly, beautifully alive.